So, I mean, let's kick off with maybe the main question is why coaching? How did you come to coaching as a career after academia?
I would say I actually met coaching during academia, which is probably quite a strange thing because for many people in academia, they may not even know what coaching is in the first place. So, just to kind of put it into context, I have a degree, master's, PhD, and postdoc in chemistry. After that, I spent 8 years doing scientific project management. So I used to manage large multi-million pound projects between academia and industry and commercializing that research. And as part of one of those commercialization projects, I started a spin-out company with 3 other female academics. And it was part of that spin-out company where I came across coaching. So I had access to free, I would say business coaching, but I think it probably stepped beyond the bounds of business coaching into more life coaching at that time. And I really started to notice the benefits of coaching. I'd never experienced it before. I had had counseling in the past that was very much about talking about insecurities or an event that had happened in order to feel better. Whereas coaching very much was, where are you heading? Where's this future version of yourself or what you want to do? And how can we start to break that down into micro steps to achieve that? And then what I would find is I would butt up against something like, oh, I couldn't possibly say that to that person, or I can't do that. And that's when the coach would really help me unpick it and move beyond it. So I kind of started to travel at light speed with the help of a coach. And I never considered coaching myself. I was just the recipient of it, which was really great. And I started to had been in that role as a scientific project manager for quite some time. So I'd been doing it since 2011, and I had had 2 maternity leaves, and it was around 2015. And I thought, I kind of need to move on here. I've become a bit stagnant, but what on earth am I going to do? I was still a little bit insecure about the value that I could bring or what I could possibly achieve. So it was actually on my 3rd maternity leave where I decided, okay, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to really think about what I'm going to do with the rest of my whole life. And about 6 weeks into that mat leave, my dad had this really huge heart attack. And I'm really thankful that he's still alive today, actually. But it left me really asking big questions. Big questions like, if I was to die today, what legacy have I left? What bigger difference am I making in the world? And that's when it was like all the little dots started to connect together. I have experienced what I've experienced as a woman in science and the leaky pipeline and what you have to come up against as not being a minority group in a particular workforce. I'd run my own business before, like not my own, but I'd run a startup company, so I kind of knew what that felt like. I experienced coaching and I thought this is really beneficial, and it kind of all came together into, oh, I could have my own coaching business and really help the people that I care about the most in the world to make their bigger impact in the world. So that's when I started my coaching qualification on my mat leave and never went back to work at the university after that.
What a journey. I guess, yeah, just taking your life experiences and seeing what goes and comes through that. So you mentioned you faced all these, different hurdles. And on your website, actually, you mentioned the capability trap. So a lot of people might not know what this is. So can you give us a little bit of an insight into what the capability trap is and how you can figure out if you're in it?
Sure. Okay. So I actually heard about the capability trap off Grey's Anatomy. I think it's in season 16. And Meredith Grey talks about just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And I think that was the trap that I'd fallen into as a scientific project manager. So I could do the role and I was very competent at it, but it wasn't really where my natural talents sort of lay. Everything felt like really hard work. It was like a motivational effort to start the big projects. I was like, I could just do this admin task. I could just like make myself look productive, but I really disliked the big meaty parts of what I was actually doing. Whereas there were other people who were in that role around me who really enjoyed it, really loved it. It seemed to be effortless. Whereas I was like kind of grinding and trudging against it the whole time. So yes, you can be highly competent at something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're best suited for it. One of the sort of highlighted it to me is that we went on one of these like training away day type things, and there was a lady there who was doing talent dynamics profiling, and I did my profile, and it's one of these personality profiles, and when I came back I thought, well, that sounds nothing like me, absolutely nothing like me. And I realized that I'd answer the questions as if I was in that current role rather than if I had a choice. And she's like, oh, where would you put yourself? I said, well, I'd be this profile over here. And it was pretty much the opposite of the profile I had. And that was a really clear indicator for me that I was pretty much doing a job that was completely opposite and wrong for where my natural talents lie. And when you can figure this stuff out, it's one of the really big pieces in terms of career design. So when you figure out where your natural talents lie, you can create a really great leadership pathway for yourself where you can be in flow, you can add the most value, and really start to excel at what it is that you do. So I think there's a little link actually to an article I wrote about it in Chemistry World. If someone's interested in delving deeper into the capability trap, I'm sure that link will magically appear in the chat box as well.
Absolutely, we'll get that in the chat now. And another thing, I guess, that can be, a roadblock in progressing into whatever career, I guess, you're choosing is imposter syndrome, and that I think that's a bit more well known in terms of a term. But again, how do you define imposter syndrome? What is it, and how can you deal with it?
So I think you probably heard in my language as I was talking about, I'm not sure if I could even set up a startup company. I'm not sure if, all these mini blocks that we put in our way tend to be overarching. Underneath that is what we call imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome isn't a pathological condition. It's not that the wiring in your brain's wrong. It's a syndrome. It's something we experience. And it's the sort of definition is the inability to internalize and own one's successes. And if you think about it, a lot of people go, oh yeah, but I know loads of people who have imposter syndrome and they're really capable and competent. Therefore, I'm the real imposter here. So that's meta imposter syndrome. If any of you here experience that, I know people have it, but blah, blah, blah. It's still me. And we know that over 70% of the whole population have experienced signs or symptoms of imposter syndrome that impair their professional sort of performance. And often this can result in people like getting stuck, so not taking action on something, procrastinating, or taking non-aligned action, doing something that maybe is outside of their values in some way, or even sort of working really, really hard and pushing through and doing too much as well. We can get that. So there's kind of 3 layers to imposter syndrome. So if you're here on the call today and you want to join in, and you can tell me if you've got one of these layers to imposter syndrome. So the first layer is that you feel like things are unearned or undeserved in some way. Maybe you got a bit lucky about something. And put a 1 in the chat box if you've ever experienced that. A bit like in the final year of my PhD, a senior lecturer said to me, oh, I know you're looking for positions. I know someone who's got a postdoc, like a position. I'll connect you. And even though I showed up for the interview, got the position, I felt like I only got it because of that contact. Like it was undeserved. And therefore I needed to prove myself as soon as I started that role. So if anyone on the call today has experienced something like that, you can let me know in the chat box if that's you, put 1 or me. There's another layer to imposter syndrome too. So that's overcrediting other people. So it's like the Oscars. someone says, oh, well done, Maria, you did a really great job. And you go, oh, I couldn't have done it without this person and this person and this person. And we don't claim our own credit. We're very good at shining a light on other people. And while it's important to give other people credit, if we shine the light and don't claim our own credit, we start to feel a bit resentful over time if people only look over there and never praise or recognize us again. And then you can even get isolation or feeling a bit unknown by the people around you. And then the final layer to imposter syndrome is minimizing language. So we squash our achievements. We say things like, it's no big deal, it's no big thing, it's just something I did, please don't ask me about it. You know, we make it really small, and then we start to believe that. So in the end, imposter syndrome boils down to a collection of limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves. Whether that's, I'm not good enough, I don't know enough, I'm not worthy enough, people are out to get me, I haven't got enough time, I'm too old, I'm too fat, whatever it is, they all sort of boil together and create this imposter syndrome.
So you've experienced both imposter syndrome and sort of being in the capability trap through your early, career in academia then. So obviously you had those sort of internal hurdles, barriers to sort of overcome. But what sort of external hurdles were there that you had to, overcome? And what were maybe the hardest ones that you had to figure out how to deal with?
Oh, thank you to Yvette for putting my imposter syndrome workbook in there if you want it. Can I check the question?
Yes.
So when you're saying external barriers, are you talking about the systems that were in place that maybe prevented you progressing in your career? Can you just
yeah, so I mean, you were experiencing all this stuff in academia, but what was there sort of systemic, barriers? Were they hardest to overcome, or were there sort of other like life factors or things which you had to sort of deal with? What sort of things did you find the hardest to figure out?
I think the hardest part for me in academia in terms of the kind of the structures that are in place that don't really support people so well, and the fact that as soon as you move from a PhD to a postdoc, it's typically short-term contracts. And it happens to coincide at a time in your life, if you choose to, you might be thinking about starting a family. So for me, I've moved from a PhD to a postdoc. Already, I'm feeling imposter syndrome because I've got to prove myself because I didn't really deserve that position. 4 weeks in, I fall pregnant and I'm on a 12-month contract. So that's going to cause even more of this. I need to prove myself to make myself so invaluable, I'll even have a job at the end of this 12 months to return back to. So I think a lot of the structures in place in terms of the security of roles within academia, the length of contracts, the maternity pay, all the kind of system stuff is not there. And what happens is we see there's a leaky pipeline. So the higher up you get in academia, the less women there are. So we start off in chemistry at like 43% of undergraduates are women. By the time you get to prof level, being a professor, it's 9%. And for me, this is one of the critical moments. It's that, do we support women to have families and stay in academia, or do we not do things like how it is now and notice that that's one of the biggest drop-off points?
So you came to your coaching career sort of very naturally through academia and your experiences in it, and now you help other people to figure out what they want to do. So what is an average day like for you? Is there an average day for you as a coach?
I think we could say there's an average week,
Okay.
maybe. So I tend to, and I've learned this over the last 3 years in my business, not to just have an open calendar all the time. I got myself into a bit of a kind of working all the time mode when I first started, particularly with COVID, where I had to have the kids during the day and I pushed all the client work to the evening, and suddenly I was like having a dual life. So now what I have is coaching on a Wednesday and a Friday. Well, I have group coaching work and also one-to-ones during that time. And on a Tuesday and a Thursday, I do training. So I do a lot of kind of skills, personal, professional development training into universities, companies, women's leadership networks, things like that on those two days. And then I've got Monday to actually prepare for all of those various different things to happen and to move the business forward. So even if I only have, say, 1 hour in my week to move my business forward, I know exactly the action that needs to happen in order to make that a reality. So that will come down to launches that are happening later in the year, or I need to create a sales page today on that thing, or I need to write a sales sequence, or I need to create some videos to do with a launch. Whatever it is, I know what I need to do to move forward. So you can move forward in the business in a very short amount of time a week, as long as you know what you're doing in that time.
Absolutely. Organization is very important. So what is the most rewarding either project or challenge or something that you've encountered in your career as a coach so far?
The most rewarding, I think, is when I get emails from clients after a session or even after a period of time, and they come back and they tell you how things have gone as a result of something you've done together. So it's getting to really see and feel the impact you're creating. Now, many people go into science because they want to make a difference, make an impact. And I was doing that, especially like maybe when I was commercializing research, you're trying to get it to where it's needed as fast as possible. But I felt very disconnected from the purpose. Like I couldn't see the end users of the whatever we were doing, the Mowbi test or this particular thing. I just couldn't see it, and I was very disconnected from it, or it was happening on a very long time scale. Whereas for coaching, I could like multiple times a week get the feedback and really feel, yeah, like I've really helped someone today, and that makes me feel really good.
Brilliant. And then I guess on the flip side a little bit, what's your least favorite thing about maybe not even being a coach, but generally, being a freelancer running a business? What's the thing that you could do without doing?
Let's just say I hate accounting. So
I think that's a popular one.
My least favorite job to do. So when I was talking about talent dynamics, obviously coaching and trainings up at this end. At the opposite end is the detail focus, systems, processes, anything like that. And I do have an accountant, but you have to do some form of preparation, at least for that, and keeping track of things. And I haven't done it yet this year. So there you go.
The year is young. There's still time.
Yeah.
So, you had this sort of experience from being in a startup in academia and coming out. So how was it starting up your business on your own as a freelancer, as an entrepreneur? What was that process like? Was it a bit easier because you had sort of experience, or were there specific challenges which you really found challenging at the time but then like learned a lot from?
It was so much easier because I'd done it before. So I remember with the startup at university, I was agonizing over whether it should be a limited company or a sole trader, or what the thing, and what about bank accounts and insurance. And I must have spent months on that kind of stuff. So when I started the coaching business, I was just like 2 hours, I've got a company, Bob's your uncle. Like, once you know what you're doing, it's super simple and easy, and you don't have to fret over all of those details. The thing that I hadn't anticipated, I guess, in the coaching business was getting clients. I hadn't really thought through that before starting. It was just kind of I'll do my practice clients, and then they'll refer me to more clients, and then I'll just build it up slowly. But what I've realized is that you do have to be super visible. in order to get business. And with that, especially because I want to do that online rather than in person, you have to have a huge social media presence to make it happen.
Is
And
that
that is what I hadn't anticipated and how I would feel about being so visible.
was that quite a shock then when you you figured out that you had to be super visible online, like on social media and stuff? Was that quite a big hurdle that you had to sort of overcome?
It wasn't a shock, I knew it, but in order to really connect with my audience, I do share things that are personal to me or personal experiences. And in order to do that, I had to overcome, what will people think if I write this? First of all, not so much. I did a lot of hiding on LinkedIn, where friends, family, people I don't really like, those kind of people, didn't see it. And what I've really stepped into is just owning it fully. So whether that's like the judgment of parents or friends or people you went to school with, like who cares, essentially. I've managed to finally move beyond what people think. So now I'm free. I have the freedom of choice of platform and what I say as well. So that's quite liberating, actually.
And what, let's say, 2 or 3 traits are really important when you are a coach? Like, what do you need to have to be able to coach other people successfully?
Ooh, good question. 3 traits. I would go with, so first of all, I think, and I know this might sound a bit strange, but I think to be a good coach, you have to have some form of intuition. And intuition, my science brain is going, don't say that out loud, don't say it out loud. But it's asking the question that is underneath the question. So it's being able to hear what people's saying, being able to hear see at so many different levels, the tone, the body language. They might be saying, oh yeah, I feel fine about that, but their body might be telling me something else. And my intuition will be going, it's not that, it's not that. And then I will be like, what's the real question? The real question for you. So the intuition is going to be an important feature of being a coach. Also, the ability to listen at all levels, and that's going to be important. And also reflective mode as well. So to be able to really evaluate what's happened, reflect upon it, and help people move forward. So those are my top 3 traits. I might change my mind at some point.
You can let us know when you change. So I guess the last big thing is, what advice do you have for people in academia who are figuring out what their next career move is, whether they want to stay in or leave and pursue something else? What advice do you have for them generally?
So I usually take people through a 6-step sort of strategy or process in order to figure out the big what's next question. And often that begins with some foundations of not just working in your career, but actually working on it. So we need to get some time and energy back to be able to have the headspace to do that. And then I kind of layer on top of that, overcoming the limiting beliefs. Because if we start the process from I'm not good enough, the results we're going to get in terms of what's next are not going to be full of potentiality. They're going to be from a position of fear and not enough. So that's what we're going to get at the end of it. So we work on that next. And then when you're in a position of, okay, I feel more resourced in myself and I have an abundance of energy to even think about this, we look at that natural talent. So we find flow and we really look at how our natural talents can create a leadership pathway. And then you layer on top of that vision, purpose in life, career values, what's important to me in order to feel fulfilled. And then we layer on top of that the mission and articulating what it is that you want, elevating your professional positioning. And then on top of that, we put the networking and marketing yourself into that position. to the strategy. So I kind of like take people through a process to help them do that.
Mm. And if someone's, got a career in mind, I mean, I know we've got quite a few people who are interested in psychom, for example. So if they had sort of a psychom career in mind, what specific sort of things would you tell them to start maybe looking at, not even just sort of working with them, but you're interested in this career. What sort of general things could you do to see if it fits within your capabilities and things like that? What would you say to that?
So if you've already got something in mind and it's not this like big, it could be anything next, that's really great because you've got like some grounding starting point. You're probably starting a bit higher up in terms of the pyramid, as I call it. And I would start to think about really positioning yourself to make that leap. So for me, LinkedIn would be a huge step and something that you could do daily, taking really micro steps towards positioning yourself for that next step. So it would be things like a daily expansion of your network from 10 people who could possibly hire you. So you're the next person who might be your boss, for example, or the people who work within that. Or even creating a gold list of companies that you would love to work for with that particular career in mind. And basically filling your boots, fill your network full of those people so that one, you can start to create a network full of ideal people, but also then start to get visible. So commenting on posts and maybe sharing something of interest so that you get visibility within those networks. And that way, when you're ready to make the next step, you can harness the network that you've created into an opportunity. But without the network, there's no harnessing. You're kind of stuck with the process of waiting for the job advert and following the system, where we know that sort of 57% of new hires come from referrals. So the network's critical for any next step that you're going to take.
And on the flip side, I know we've talked a lot about coming out of academia because that's been sort of the path and the problems that are in academia. But what advice would you give to people who maybe do want to stay in academia but might be facing some of those, systemic hurdles, but they want to progress a career there? What would you have for them?
Yeah, I think it's really important to address the systems and the processes that are there. But in order to do that, there's a number of things that we have to be able to do first. So we have to be resourced enough in ourselves to do that. So I would still, and I still do, work with clients who want to stay in academia and help them manage their time and energy effectively and overcome their limitations, their personal limitations. And yes, that might be from early childhood, but it can also be from the systems and the discriminations and the cultural paradigms that we live in as well. So I help them to do that so they're resourced enough, first of all, to tackle themselves and the work that they're doing, and then so that they can be great role models for everyone else coming through, so that they can tackle the cultural discrimination and the cultural things that are happening in that workplace, so that then there's enough people to hustle to change the systems and the processes. Because if there are enough people who are able to do that now, we would have parity.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. So it all starts at the individual level in order to change the big things. Each person counts in my mind.
Absolutely. And last thing, before we wrap up the chat, one key thing that you would want everyone to take away with them today?
One key thing for everyone today. So when it comes down to career, I really think that it's important to really work on ourselves first, overcome the limitations that we have internally so that we can step into a more potentiality version of ourselves and make a really big difference in the world. So if I want that for all my children and everyone else to do the inner work, essentially.
Brilliant. Well, I think that wraps up our little chat, but now we do want to, open up the floor to any questions. So has anyone got any questions? You can either pop them in the chat, or you can ask Hannah yourself. Going through, I've got lots of Sheffield-based people in the chat. Sammy says the capability trap sounds a bit like a career path that might be aspirational but not necessarily essential. Could be the same as something you can do but doesn't mean you should, which is something her mentor highlighted, which she found useful.
I would tend to disagree.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's essential that people do work that is fulfilling to them, where they can find a meaning, where they can make a bigger contribution in the world, where they can find joy in the work they're doing, and where they can really shine and have that natural talent, brilliance at it. I don't think that's aspirational. I think that if we really look at most of the careers, we can find quite a lot of those things in the things that we're doing. And it's not about saying, okay, my aspirational version has to happen within the next 12 months. We're saying that that's what we want all the way out there. And each step that I take is going to be more aligned than the last one, because I understand my natural talent, I know my vision, purpose, mission. Each time I can get more alignment with that. And many people fall into that trap of the next step has to be perfect, it has to be right. But it's very rare that we take that next step and stay in it for 50 years, the exact same spot. In fact, I'd be very worried if you did. So it's more, we let that one unfold, more alignment, and eventually we're going to get to something that really works for you. So I think so I was saying that particular point was about pursuing a PhD that is aspirational to me, but not essential. Yeah, I mean, in particular, if you're going to spend 4 years doing a PhD, it has to be something that you deeply care about. And for me, I definitely picked the wrong PhD. Now, I did my PhD as a way to escape what I was doing previously. So I was using it as an escape route, actually. And I did something that I was comfortable with, that I knew how to do, and that I knew I would enjoy. But for me, it was a blue skies thinking PhD. And by the end of it, I was like, there's no application for this. It was driving me bonkers. So when I did the postdoc, it had to be something with an application. And that became really important, because that was about making something that made a difference in the world, that made a contribution. Yes, I hope that, I don't know if that answered the question, but I enjoyed my little rant.
Well, we've got a thank you, so I think it did. I've got a sort of question based on, like, I don't know, I was just reflecting the other day. I think I was watching this is really weird information. I was watching like Cobra Kai, which is like the Karate Kid, but like these days it's on Netflix. Shout out to Cobra Kai.
I think I've seen that.
But it's, you know, all the kids are like, you know, the technology's moved on, all the kids are on their phone, and it's sort of looking at that weird sort of interface between sort of the old school and how things have progressed over the years. And I was wondering, have you seen that in people's careers where they're so used to having things sort of now, even if they are in academia? Obviously, it takes a long time to do a PhD and then you do postdocs. But when they're coming out of academia, have you seen that they're sort of wanting things to happen really quickly, or, you know, is there the mindset of, you know, that things will take time? I was wondering if you've seen anything like that.
I'm not sure I've seen an impatience in the clients that I've worked with, but what I have seen is that they have progressed far faster than they were expecting in their careers. So, for example, I had a client who, when I first met her, was under a decision point of, do I take a fellowship or do I take this position in industry? We did some work around the fulfillment, what's, you know, the values that she had and what was important to her. And she decided to pick the one in industry. Now, that was probably around 2 years ago. And since then, she has been promoted 3 times, including having a maternity leave. And I think she's got to the point where she's like, I never expected to get here. I thought I would still be in that position 3 years later. So I think in particular, what coaching can help people do is to move faster.
Right.
through the stages. So it just kind of collapses time for people a little bit.
Yeah, brilliant. Any other questions? Let us know in the chat. Chrissa was talking about she's experienced all 1, 2, and 3 of the imposter syndrome, which I think I can also relate to.
It's a great club to be part of.
Yeah, it's definitely in academia. It does seem to be, you do have a lot of imposter syndrome in that sort of like area or like career, and I don't know how that compares to other sectors like industry, or is it worse in academia, that sort of imposter syndrome, people coming through with that?
Yeah, it's above average. So the average they're saying is around 70%. At some point you might experience it. In academia, I know there's some research around women in academia where they say 95% have moderate to intense levels of imposter syndrome. 95%, that's huge. And then there was a study done on CEOs of companies that found that 98% of CEOs experience imposter syndrome. So my kind of thoughts on that are, if you haven't experienced it yet, then maybe you've just not gone big enough yet. Because sure as sure, the bigger you go, the more it's going to trigger stuff in you. So if you haven't experienced it yet, maybe you've just not hit your stride yet.
You've got to keep pushing and find it and then go through it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'll leave the questions open for a few more minutes if anyone wants to ask Hannah anything, pick her brains. And just going back to sort of starting your own business, I definitely found like it difficult not having much like business experience to actually do that process of like, opening a bank account and, starting up different things. So it's definitely quite a big leap if you're looking, I guess, to go as a freelancer to figure out that route. And are there any things in terms of more general, just, becoming a freelancer, just generally, would you have any advice for people on that sort of just doing that step?
Yeah, so I have a business model, and as part of that business model, freelancing is part of the overall model. So I'll find partnership companies that have maybe already established. So I work a lot with a company called Skillfluence that do a lot of training and development programs into universities. So if I want to do that in my business, rather than me, and I do this, so I'll put out there the ones that I'm doing and I'll get traction that way. But I'll find a company that's already got existing routes into there and partner with them. So they then will bring the work to me, essentially. And that makes it so much easier to have a couple of key partners in that business program. So that's how I use freelancing as a kind of a way to establish routes to places where I can't necessarily get there myself. So I would think about the structure of your business model when you put it together, and how you can actually leverage partnerships in that. And we have a question here from Sabra as well. Can I ask about the scientific project management following the postdoc? Was that obtained through referral or just applying? I was considering project management too. So just on that piece, when I got my postdoc, it was actually a 50% postdoc, 50% project manager role, because it was a European funded project and we were the lead university on it. So they needed someone to also oversee the project. The upshot was I was 100% postdoc with some extra work to do on the side. That's the reality. But when I came back after mat leave, I didn't go back in the lab. So I just took the 50% project manager role and I took on other project management and ended up at I did like a 70% full-time equivalent doing that on various different projects. So it was more, I applied for it, but I was really applying for a postdoc and they kind of added that on top because I had some experience before in research business management. So they thought I would be a good fit, which clearly I wasn't. You also say, plus did your academic career set you up for the science communication world, or did you immerse yourself? So no, my academic career did not set me up in terms of this being visible out there in social media strategy. That's something I had to learn. And in fact, I've had a huge amount of personal growth through the business development too. So I learned how to use LinkedIn efficiently, did loads of training courses, lots of business development courses too, in order to get to this position where I feel like I'm on solid ground with it, as opposed to just trying stuff out and seeing what happens. Still doing that, but it's more targeted, shall we say. There's more thought behind it.
Okay, another question. Bessiana says, I'm just about to start a postdoc and simultaneously want to begin my freelance career, a business making art and scientific illustration. Oh, cool. Do you have any specific resources you would recommend to help speed the process of starting up?
So having seen what it is that you're up to in the world, wanted to make the art and the scientific illustration, I would be looking that I already know, and I can think of a number of people that are already out there doing that. So the first port of call for me would be to reach out to them, find out, from them, their experiences, how they did it, what their pitfalls were, really starting to do some research around how other people do it, because if you follow a model that works, you're more likely to succeed. So when you're just kind of going at it alone or just trying to read books and stuff, that can be quite hard. So I would be starting to connect with people who already do this and learning from them rather than a general LinkedIn learning course or a book. So I'd be stalking some people online and taking it from there.
Yep. Yeah, so we've actually in the group that I mentioned, the Freelance Collective UK group on LinkedIn, I know there is a member there who actually does scientific illustration, and I think she has her own business. So yeah, definitely check that out, Bessiana. If you join the group, and then I can connect you guys. Brilliant. Is there anything else? Any more questions for Hannah before we wrap up? And let her rest her through. She's been in workshops all morning.
I have, but I'm actually going on a 3-day personal development leadership course for the next 3 days. So this is my last thing before I get to head off for a few days. So that's going to be lovely for me.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm not getting anything else through.
Hi. Can I ask first a question, not through the chat, but like verbally?
Sure.
Yeah, I can turn on my camera as well. Hi, Hannah. Thank you for your interesting talk. I have such a question. When I'm thinking about currently I'm a postdoc and also thinking about what to do next, what step. So if I'm thinking about freelance or starting my own business, one of the first fears is that the income is quite unpredictable, especially at first. Like if compared to contract job, when you have like fixed annual salary and you know everything about how much can you spend, can you save. So here, when you start, you don't know. Well, you may have some expectations, but if something goes wrong, then you can go below, like in the be not so good, be in debt, and so this is one of the most fears for me. So based on your experience, what should you be prepared, and how quickly can it become good? So how stressful was it at first to start? Yeah, so
it's a great question. It wasn't so stressful for me because I'm in a partnership with my husband. So at first I had those fears and I thought, how can we sacrifice? I had a job that was like a £47,000 year job, it was fine. How can we sacrifice that completely in order to start this new business? And that's when I had to become really accountable for absolutely everything that we were spending. And it worked out that we could live quite fine off just his wage for 18 months. And then I would need to start bringing something in. So it gave me this buffer. And we had these check-ins every 6 months, how we're doing, like how we're moving forwards. Am I going to be able to bring some money in and make it work? But actually, post-qualification, after the coaching, within the first 3 months, I'd made 10 grand. And then after that, it was like eclipsing my old salary a lot. So it really moved quite quickly after I got over that first kind of 3-month hurdle. But for you, you've always got to protect your downside. So we protected our downside. We've got 3 kids. We needed to make sure we could cover everything no matter what, whether I was working or not working. Always protect your downside. So I don't recommend personally going into debt unless you have a very clear idea as to how you're going to get that back, over what time frame, and you would really take that bet on yourself. So my advice is protect your downside. Some great resources that will help you at this moment in time when you're just considering it are all of Daniel Priestley's books. So I think the first one is The Entrepreneur Revolution. Do read that, it's fantastic. And then to start to map out a visual business model, you can use the Strategizer Business Model Canvas as well. They're all great resources. In fact, that came from someone's PhD and turned out to be something huge. So PhDs count in the world. So I hope that helps. Nikolai.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and also just in addition to this one, so is it any like time period after which, so for example, like 3 months or half a year, so if I started my business and I'm still like after half a year, I'm still don't have income to cover my debts. So what time should I start thinking that I'm doing something wrong and I should change it? Is it any time period for this, or it's individual for everyone?
It's going to be super individual. It's really hard for me to say like at what time you would call it. So for me, we said if after 18 months nothing was happening, we would call it, but it was really clear to see that it was happening a lot faster than that within the first 3 months. But for you, it's going to be different. So I would set yourself some targets as to what you would like to achieve by when, and some plans as to how you're going to do that. For me, it's going to be a mentorship program, some form of mentorship or a business accelerator or some kind of way so you have a structure to be able to help and support you. So I would be asking myself, what support do I need with this? That's one of the key things.
Okay, thank you.
Best of luck as well. That's exciting.
Yeah, good luck, Nicola. And I think as well, just to add to that, you know, being a freelancer, it doesn't need to be this big sort of leap. You can go into it gradually. You can do it alongside another job. And I mean, that's how I started out. I was doing a few bits outside of my regular job that I had. And then when I left that job, then that's when I took the leap to do it full time. So you can sort of get the prep done and sort of test the waters whilst having sort of a bit of financial stability. If you have a job already, it doesn't need to be like a one or another sort of thing.
Agreed. I had the spin-up company and my real job along the side by side. I wouldn't recommend that. And with this particular one, my thoughts were I was going to only work 3 days a week, but actually I've enjoyed it so much. I work full time over like weird hours, but I do. So you can make it what you want to make it, essentially. That's the beauty of creating your own thing. You create what you want to create. So if I don't want to work evenings and weekends and whatever, I don't create that. Create what I want.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good note to end on. So yes, we will leave it there. If you do have any more questions, Yvette has put Hannah's LinkedIn in the chat, so you can go and connect with her there. I'm sure she'll be happy to connect and answer your questions. And I would just like to thank you very much, Hannah, for coming and speaking to us today.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you, Mike. I'm glad it was helpful too.
And I hope you have a lovely time at your personal development stuff at the end of this week. And I would also like to thank Yvette, who's been dropping links in the chat and helping organise the event. So cheers, Yvette, for that. And yes, I would also obviously like to thank everyone for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll just mention again the Freelance Collective UK groups if you want to go and connect with other people and, you know, start asking questions about freelancing or anything like that. And yes, this recording will hopefully be online. So if you want to keep up to date with the links for this recording or any of the other freelancer focused events that we have coming up, you can follow Mowbi. So we're at Mowbi UK on Twitter, or you can find us on LinkedIn as well to keep up to date with them. So yeah, thank you so much for coming along. Thank you, Tana, for chatting, and we hope to see you at our next event.